Alright, so this Knife Thoughts video is going to be a quick review of this knife, and this is the Spyderco Sliverax. And this is another design from Paul Alexander. The reason I decided to get this knife, it's actually something I've been interested in for a while because I really enjoy Paul Alexander's Ouroboros design, both because it was a gift from my wife and also I just really like some of the really unique design characteristics. So this really thickened area here towards the butt of the knife that allows you to really get a good grip on it, as well as this really serious forward finger guard that's a part of both the handle and the blade. And the Sliverax has some of those same design characteristics. So as you can see, it does have a thicker part towards the butt of the handle, and then it has this really serious forward finger guard that allows it for the blade to sit kind of at a forward angle and is something that I like in a knife generally. And it's a little bit unique. You don't see it on a whole lot of Spyderco knives especially, and knives in general really. Now it's a little different on this knife. As you can see, it's just the handle that creates that finger guard, and that's partly because there is a flipper and there's no forward finger choil on this knife. The edge goes pretty much all the way to the handle, if not a little bit past the forwardmost point of the handle. But it still is a compression lock, it just has that flipper added. And it came to me, it is a knife that I got secondhand from another knife enthusiast, not a dealer, and got a great deal on it, so I appreciate that. But it came to me, you know, with good construction, came centered with good action, both open and closed once you're used to the flipping, which I'll talk about in a second. Now, as you can hear, it does have a little bit of a weird sound closing. It must just be the ball bearings, but it doesn't really have it when you open or close the knife slowly. So I'm not exactly sure why that is, but I don't think it's a practical thing. Now, one thing I want to mention is, like on the other Paul Alexander design I recently reviewed, the Akuchi, the carbon fiber overlay on the G10 of this knife is not as nice as on some others I've seen. So first of all, a lot of people don't like that it's just a carbon fiber overlay rather than solid carbon fiber. I still prefer carbon fiber overlay over plain G10, like on the Ouroboros. But on both the Akuchi and this Sliverax, you can see that there's quite a number of voids between kind of at the intersection of the weave on that carbon fiber. So I'm not sure why I'm seeing that on these knives specifically, but just something that I have noticed. But other than that, the construction seems good. It does seem to be well ground to a nice thin edge that slices well. So it should be a good slicer, and again, partly because of that downward angle of the blade and the fact that your finger sits actually kind of above the edge so that you can get the blade pretty close to all the way down when you're cutting. So made well. Now, like I mentioned, the flipper you do have to kind of get used to, or at least I had to kind of get used to. Typically, for me, I do a light switch style flip where you pull down, and it just generally doesn't work as well. You can get it to work, but you have to get a really good, you know, fast flip to get it to work. It seems to work better in what I call a push button style, so pressing more straight down and getting a little bit more tension before you release it. And once I got used to that, it does flip pretty well. I think that the detent could probably be a little bit stronger on this knife, and it would flip a little bit better, even in that light switch style. You can see in this light switch style, the detent does break relatively easily. So you can definitely get it to flip consistently with the push button style, but I think it could have a little bit stronger of a detent and it would flip a little bit more satisfyingly and consistently. But the Spyder hole actually is really easy to get to because of this really big finger guard, and works really well to the point where I almost wonder if I wouldn't prefer this knife not as a flipper. If you look at the shape that this knife has, if you took this flipper out, it would be a really cool shape. Just like a simple kind of oblong shape here with the wider rounded top and the thinner rounded bottom, but with kind of matching angles and matching curves on each side with the spine of the handle and the spine of the blade. So I do almost think, even though I like flipper knives, that this knife would be better not as a flipper, just as spider hole opening, like again the Ouroboros. And now the thing with this knife being better as a push button style flipper, it's not something that you see on all Spydercos. Here is a Spyderco Domino. This one works better as a light switch flipper in my opinion. Push button, because this flipper tab is right above the pivot, doesn't even really work. You have to kind of use a light switch style flip. Now some knives you can kind of use both. So here is a ZT0561, and you see the flipper tab sits slightly below the pivot. So you can use kind of a push button style, but it works better as a light switch style. So that's what I'm used to more so, is the light switch style. I wanted to give you some size comparisons here, because this is definitely a bigger knife than the Ouroboros. So here is, we'll open it up, and here is a full-size Benchmade Griptilian. The Griptilian is actually slightly smaller, slightly shorter, both in the blade and the handle, than the Sliverax. And then here is a Rat 1. Again, same thing. I would say that the blade is pretty close to the same length, and the handle is pretty close to the same length on this one. But it does look a little bit bigger, the Sliverax does, just because it has this angle to it. But it is pretty much the same length. And then here is a Spyderco Native 5, so a little bit smaller, what some people might consider more EDC friendly size, at about 3 inches on the blade. Definitely smaller than the Sliverax. So not a small knife, but definitely not a big knife, at least for my consideration, and something I would definitely enjoy carrying. I just do think that I would prefer if it had a little stronger detent, and or it was just a spider hole opening. Now one thing that's kind of cool about this knife that you might not think is the case, because it's a compression lock. Sometimes on compression locks, when you close it, the tang of the knife hits your finger and it doesn't close the whole way. You might think that that would be the case, being that it has this flipper tab, but it has a nice big and low compression lock cutout, so that if you hold onto this compression lock, at the bottom of this cutout, it will close the whole way, and that flipper tab will just go right past your finger. So I do like that design aspect. So overall, I really like the design of this knife, the handle shape, the blade shape. It's extremely utilitarian, very, very ergonomic, and cuts well. Would be a great slicer, a great all-around user. Again, I just think that I would prefer it even without this flipper tab, but with the flipper tab with a little bit stronger detent. So that's my thoughts on the Spyderco Sliverax. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your comments, and also make sure you subscribe to my channel and click the bell so you get notifications when I post new videos. Also check out my social media. I'm on Instagram and Facebook at Knife Thoughts, and my website knifethoughts.com, where I post articles on knives like this and knife related topics. And last but not least, as always, don't forget to go out and do good.